This is the E-Commerce Edge podcast with your host, Jason Greenwood. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the E-Commerce Edge podcast with me, Jason Greenwood, your host. It is my pleasure to welcome our next guest to the podcast, Mr. Scott Phillips from both Vaulted Ventures and Quantum Safe Alliance. Welcome to the podcast, Scott.
Oh, hi, Jason. Great to be with you.
Awesome to have you along for the ride today, and you are dialing in from the great state of Victoria, Australia, there in Melbourne, yeah?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I'm actually Tasmanian by birth, but I've been living in Victoria for long enough now to call myself Victorian.
Nice. And which one has the worst weather? I think they're vying for it.
Yeah, it whistles up pretty hard from Antarctica right into the dock in Hobart, and it tends to blow up this far as well. We're really getting it at the moment. Oh, in fact, the entirety of the Australian eastern seaboard is copping it hard at the moment. There's a storm that it's like on the cusp of being a cyclone. Yeah, there's a lot of rain hitting this part of the world at the moment.
Yeah, you're getting into wintertime. We're getting into summertime up here in North America. Yeah, I lived in New Zealand for almost 30 years, so I'm very familiar with Antipodean weather and the vagaries of Antipodean weather, and only been living here in Pueblo for the last 2.5 years. But prior to that, I was 18 years in Auckland, 10 years in Christchurch. So I definitely, and I have lots of family in Aussie, family in Brisbane, and friends all over Australia. And I'm actually going to be in Melbourne later this year in August for the B2B E-Commerce Association B2B E-Commerce World Conference. I'm going to be emceeing that conference, so I'll be down in your neck of the woods very soon. It's a hell of a long flight for me, though. I got to go to Puebla, to Mexico City, to LA, to Melbourne, and then reverse my course. But it's going to be a lot of fun. I've got some family flying down to Melbourne from Brisbane to spend a couple of days with me after the conference, so it'll be worth the flight.
Yeah, it's a long way. I quite like it. It's like just sit back and relax and just chill out, do nothing for a really long time. It's a bit of a meditation.
That's right. No, I couldn't agree more. Now, before we get into specifically what Vaulted Ventures and Quantum Safe Alliance is designed to do and why you founded them, help me understand and help my audience understand how you got to be in this space. You are, if I look back across your history, you fall smack in the category of serial entrepreneur. You were an in-house counsel, which tells me you're maybe qualified as a barrister and solicitor at some stage, did that for a little while, but then pretty much since then, you have founded and run startups. So tell me what sucked you into this space after the career in law. Very short one.
Oh, all right. If I rewind the tape all the way, then I'm the son of a telecom tech, right? So my father was a technician for Telecom Australia. And so I was good at science and maths, so I grew up around oscilloscopes and multimeters. And I know what the inside of a magnetic relay exchange smells like. I overcompensated for that by doing a law degree in the end. And so that's fun because I've got a foot in both camps of technology and the law. But as I graduated, I thought, as an undergraduate, I thought I was going to be a solicitor, practicing, certificated. But I decided that I really wanted to spend some time on the client side and actually get to understand the world before I go off advising people about it. And never went back. So I started my career as a technologist. A software development company was my first outing doing video analytics in the late 90s. And so that journey has been fun and complicated. And got into blockchain around 2014. I bought a Bitcoin for $700. And then a couple of years later, I got really interested in Ethereum, smart contracts, and that sort of thing. And eventually, because of that journey, I met the cryptographer behind our project. Yeah, so that's the Cook's tour of my trajectory. Yeah. But really, as an undergraduate, I was really fascinated by the conjunction between law and computing. And in fact, I cobbled together my own version of a course in computer law before that was even a thing. Mostly through the lens of intellectual property law. I got really interested in that, and I was I wrote a paper called Copyright in Cyberspace, and later on got into down the rabbit hole of software patentability. Yeah, been very interested in that sort of thing for a long time.
And obviously, you've exited out of Block Zero, Keyframe, and some of the other things that you were working on, VR, etc. And now let's fast forward to just nearly 4 years ago. started Vaulted Ventures, and became a founding member of the Quantum Safe Alliance just under a year ago. So what caused you to make this pivot into this new world and decided to start this new venture nearly 4 years ago? What did you see coming on the horizon that made you said, okay, cool, I've enjoyed the blockchain stuff. I've enjoyed some of the web app stuff that we've built. I've enjoyed some of the VR stuff, but I feel like maybe there's a bigger opportunity in some of these other areas around cryptography, and particularly around quantum computing and cryptography. What was it that you saw evolving in the marketplace? And it sounds like you're the kind of guy that likes to skate to where the puck is going, right? And you want to make sure that you're at the cutting edge, right? So
Absolutely.
what was it that you saw coming that you said, hey, I need to start this new business in this new space?
It was really the understanding that advancements in quantum computing are inevitable, not going to stop, and that they're going to cause a major disruption. And it was really meeting our cryptographer that really gave me perfect clarity around that. He quite successfully red-pilled me on blockchain. I'd been an active member of a thing called the MBTC, the Melbourne Bitcoin Technology Centre, and I'd taught people the information architecture of blockchains. And here's just, they're not secure enough. They are not secure enough for where we're going. And I'm like, what? Blockchains are not secure enough? And he's, they are probabilistic in their security model. They're not deterministic. You need deterministic if you're going up against quantum computing, because essentially quantum computing provides access to unlimited computing power for certain types of computation problems. And it just so happens that one of those types of computation problems that quantum computing is really good at is breaking PKI, breaking public key infrastructure, which runs, all of e-commerce, by the way. You're not going to put your credit card over the internet if it's not secured. And the thing that secures it is a certification authority digital certificate at the end of the day, which is a public key and a private key. So this is asymmetric encryption, public key and a private key. If it's symmetric encryption, it only has one key, but you have to use that same key to encrypt and to decrypt. And that's really difficult if you then need to somehow send that key to the recipient over the internet. What? Oh, no, because anyone intercepts that in the meantime, which they probably will, then all your secrets are open. So there's no encryption if somebody else has the key. There's no effective encryption if somebody else has the key. And so with public-private key cryptography, it's designed such that anyone can access the public key and encrypt the message with that, but only you have the private key as the recipient. That's a really interesting innovation, but it's dependent on people not being able to find the private key with having access to the public key, which they do because it's public. If somebody can come along with a fancy future quantum computer and take that public key and then derive the private key from it, and none of it works anymore. And so all of your e-commerce security protections just fly straight out the window. And
Sure.
that's a problem, to put it mildly.
Yep, understood. Have heard this story about quantum computing for a while, that it renders modern encryption basically where it would take a current supercomputer 20 years to maybe break standard encryption unless you're the NSA and you've got access to unlimited compute under standard ones and zero bit-based encryption, then it might take you years to break standard encryption. Whereas with quantum computing, that same problem might be able to be decrypted in minutes or hours and are very close to instantaneous. And so this becomes a real problem for all modern encryption algorithms that are based on standard computing, bit-based computing. The thing that I would love to better understand, because I haven't gone down the quantum rabbit hole nearly as far as you have. However, from what I have read, we are potentially 10 to 20 years away, depending on who you are speaking to and hear from, even Google themselves, and they have poured billions of dollars into quantum computing, as have many other very large players in the tech space. Even they say they are probably at least a decade away from creating a truly usable, publicly accessible quantum computer that doesn't have sky-high error, that basically trying to bring the error rates down to something that is even remotely close to modern computers is the big hurdle that they at Google are facing. And so I want to be realistic about how imminent this challenge is and why it's a priority for you now as opposed to a decade from now. And secondarily, what is it that you intend to do about this impending problem, regardless of the timeline? What is your thinking about your solution in regards to this impending doom type of challenge that we're facing? Again, doesn't really matter whether it's 6 months away or 6 years away or 60 years away. We will have to face this at some point. So what does that look from your perspective?
So I think that the predictions that have been made, and the most reasonable version of that I've heard, is that 2/3 of technologists believe that it'll happen within 10 years, and the remaining third believe it'll happen within 15 years. So that, I think that's a reasonable survey of what people think about this. I think that is an extrapolation of the current forms of quantum computing and the current challenges of quantum computing. And in that sense, it's quite reasonable. What I don't think it's factoring in is that the current ways of even thinking about quantum computing are not going to remain the same. There are a whole bunch of new technologies in the quantum computing realm, if we can say, that will bring that timeline down. So it's not just having a big fridge and getting your qubits to a couple of millikelvin. There are room temperature quantum machines using photonics, for example. Completely different paradigm, whole different set of timeframes. Then you've got things like Ghana 1 that Microsoft brought out, which is setting up, how do I describe this? Setting up more of a field of quantum effect rather than actual quantum atoms. And so that's a completely different way of looking at it as well. So each of these things is moving down from a hardware perspective, but then just in the last week, we've had some announcements from research teams that are bring it down in a different way from a mathematical point of view. So they're finding better quantum algorithms that can also bring that time frame down. So I think once you factor those in, I think most people are probably wrong about their far out timelines at 10 or 15 years. I think this is happening potentially way quicker. Now, a lot of people use the analogy of, fusion. They say the same thing about fusion. Maybe, but there's no reason why that as an analogy needs to stick. It could just break open, and the cadence with which we're getting news stories about major advancements in quantum tech, I think something's going to happen that brings us right up to date super quickly. And that's we're not ready for that. Nowhere close.
And was that the genesis of the business in the first place, that you created Vaulted Ventures to address this impending doom coming to public cryptography?
That's really the vision of the cryptographer. I've understood this sort of thing in the abstract for some time, but he really saw this. So he's also ex-Telecom and Telecom Australia, and he's worked after Telecom. He worked in the United States for more than a decade building financial market infrastructure. So he has a really deep understanding of financial systems. And he saw the problem of quantum coming over the horizon since the 1990s. And so when I met him, I came to understand that he's been beavering away, building solutions. Like he never stopped. He moved back to Australia full time and never stopped building. He built this entire infrastructure to be secure against the advent of these quantum systems. And I couldn't unknow that once I learned about it. And I became deeply fascinated by it. And so he and I have had many conversations over the last 7 years or so. And he's set me straight about a whole bunch of things. And then, as I say, around 3-ish years ago, I worked out what it might look like for me commercially and how I can assist in the project. So we then put Vaulted Ventures together, which is the company, and the Vaulted Objects infrastructure is the product that we're taking to market. The Vaulted Objects infrastructure is really a set of cloud-based functions that provide support for digital commerce, for data privacy and data security and data provenance, and also for legal rights management. So there's an element of this that really maps to, supports and leverages the common law. And so it's unique in that sense because I don't know that many systems that really mesh entirely with common law principles. Well, that's fairly unique in my view. And so it's really a digital identity protocol. So you can't really do any of that without digital identity at the heart of things. So that's there. And there's a few other pieces that we can get into in a moment. But really the point of this is that the entirety of it has been created to achieve a security profile, which is described as ITS, which is information theoretic security. Now, that is to say that it's secure because it's based on information theory, right? And that's quite distinct from, say, PQC, post-quantum cryptography, which is the new breed of more complex algorithms that will take quantum computers longer to break. But there's no way to prove that they're actually secure against unlimited computing power. So this is what we've done that's different to that, which is we've actually leveraged the work of the father of information theory, Claude Shannon. So Shannon worked for Bell Labs in the 1940s, and he wrote a paper entitled Communication Theory of Secrecy Systems. And in that, he outlined what information theoretic security looks like. And so he essentially proved in that paper that you can build at least one type of cryptography, or a one-time pad, that is secure, provably secure on the maths and on the logic against infinite computing power. And it's actually quite simple when you break it down. It's secure because of the information architecture, the information theory, rather than secure because it's wildly complicated.
Aha. And who would be the buyers of this technology? Would it be the likes of Shopify? Would it be the likes of NASA? Would it be the likes of the NSA? Would it be the likes of IBM, Microsoft? Who is it that would typically be implementing this layer of information security infrastructure, for lack of a better term? At what level of the stack does this get implemented? Does it get implemented by the fintechs themselves, Visa, MasterCard? Does it get implemented by the cryptocurrency providers? Does it get by the major crypto brokerages and exchanges? Who would implement this security layer so that it was consumable by the general public and users of technology?
My answer is slightly trite if I'd say D, all of the above, right? What I really mean is that we've already implemented it. It's a question as to who uses and deploys it in their own stack. So they'll integrate it into their stack. There is part of that trite answer is that there is a level of inevitability about this situation. So there needs to be quantum safe mechanisms rather than, I make a distinction between quantum resistance and quantum security or quantum safety. And I think that PQC and quantum resistance is entirely valid in the sense that better than nothing, better than not doing anything, a whole lot better, because it's going to buy you time. But really, So in the world of PQC, there's this concept of crypto agility, or some people call it quantum agility, which means when you implement, do it through an abstraction so that then you can swap out that algorithm for something better when you need to. And we're thinking, okay, what's that process look like long term? It means that you're swapping stuff out until you find something that actually works properly. And what we think that is ITS.
And would this be something that the government of Australia, government of New Zealand, the Five Eyes, etc., would want to take on board for the information security of their citizenry, of things like passports, of things like digital IDs, full stop? There's a lot of concern about there's a lot of concern, and I think I share that concern about digital IDs. I think there's a lot of concern around CBDCs. I have big concern about nation states creating CBDCs and programmable money. I have real issues with that. But it seems like they're all hell-bent on going in that direction, at least for now, because they want total control over the populace. We learned that during COVID, that they want total control over the populace, and they want to force us to do absolutely anything that they like. They make, in Australia, they famously, no jab, no pay. So if you're on the dole and you don't get the jab, you don't get the dole. So basically, if you have any form of dependency on the government whatsoever, they want to have total control over your life. That's been proven time and time again. And as we know, famously, absolute power corrupts absolutely. So this is of broad public concern for me. I'm a big fan of freedom. I'm a big fan of privacy. I'm a big fan of the government not knowing all my shit, basically. And I'm a big fan of cash for that very reason. I just don't think the government needs to know absolutely everything I'm doing every single second of the day. But my concern is that if this infrastructure requires completely digital identification systems that then would typically be issued by the government in the first instance at the point of birth or whatever, and maybe we have a digital birth certificate or whatever it might be. My concern is how much government control would inherently be built into a system like this by definition. Like how much government control would have to be there for us to develop and deliver this kind of digital infrastructure globally.
Yeah, governments will have a role here, but it'll be quite limited to what sensibly they can actually do, which is that an identity is made of identity attributes, right? And a bunch of those identity attributes are organised by the government. Your birth certificate, your passport number, your driver's license number, and a bunch of other things. And so when somebody comes in and proves their identity, we'll take them off to those APIs over at DFAT or VicRoads or wherever. Choose your local authority. And they'll say, oh, yeah, I'm such, and this is my driver's license number. Boing, and they'll come back confirmed, and we'll store confirmed, right, as an identity attribute. Oh, we sent them that there, and they knew what they were talking about. Boom, we've got a data point. We collect enough of those data points, we say, all right, you're an identity. And the infrastructure has its own ethics almost. So I regard it as entirely Web3, right? Even though it's running on cloud computing. A lot of blockchainers will go, oh, that's nonsense. It's not, because what our framework has is a decentralized control architecture, right? And that's the important part of that. So we can't get in and monkey around with your identity. In the same way as we can't get in and fool around with your digital assets or extract your data or force a payment or anything like that. So it's a secure, self-sovereign identity protocol. And our cryptographer has been into protocol. He's a protocol wonk since the days of analog computing, right? So he knows protocols. And it turns out he knows identity protocols. And so he's balanced all the various rights and responsibilities around this and is attempting perfection in that sense. So there's a role for government and there's a role for us that actually neither control your stuff.
And so this ID, this hyper-secure identification protocol, for lack of a better term, is it stored on the blockchain?
No, it's got nothing to do with the blockchain, except that it tips its hat to blockchain in the sense of being inspired by it, right? The Bitcoin white paper was revolutionary, if not fit for purpose, right? It says on the subheading, peer-to-peer electronic cash. It's not that, because when was the last time you bought a coffee with Bitcoin? But Bitcoin really showed what is possible in terms of the deployment of an architecture for the financialization of the internet at the protocol level. And that's how I define Web3. And that is what we're doing.
You were talking about how the key does actually exist inside the infrastructure. But if we revisit something you mentioned before, which was this is generated and consumed a single time, and then it has to be a new key has to be regenerated every single time the data or infrastructure are accessed. Is that correct?
Yeah. So the keys are deterministic and also ephemeral. They can be
In other words, temporary.
Yeah, but they can be recreated with the right recipe, with the right bits of information. That information comes together through the key generator inside of the infrastructure, and it can recreate the key that was used to, say, encrypt the content of a vaulted object. So whatever the function is, there's a few different functions in there. But so we call these phantom keys, right? Because they're there, but they're not. They're there at potential when all the right things slot into place. Then the key can be generated, but that key is never stored. Even when it's generated, it gets piped straight into the function, does the thing, and doesn't exist. So the attack surface on this is as minimal as you could possibly imagine in the things that work.
And so you're saying that at the moment, to your knowledge, maybe something out there you don't know about, but to your knowledge, two things are true as of today. First of all, there's no other system out there like this on the planet today that's merged these two technologies together in a meaningful way into a working system. And two, this in theory is completely impervious to any form of quantum attack.
Yes, there's no known attack surface, which is a wild thing to say, and for a statement that will need to be proved. There are security audits on our timeline. Our cryptographer actually has a long background in standards around this sort of thing, so he knows exactly how to prove what we're saying. And yeah, so it's entirely unique as far as we know. And it's possible that other people will eventually be able to build something that fits our category. It's ITS KMS, but we're the ones that we know of to date.
And why Azure only, not Google Cloud, not AWS, not other public cloud providers? And do you envisage a future where this can work on any cloud?
Yeah, we do. And the reason for Azure is because it works and we had to pick something.
And what are next steps for you guys apart from trying to go to market and commercialize and get high adoption rates of this across industries and across verticals and across markets? And obviously the goal is to make this a global standard and to make it an accepted global standard, because without adoption, again, I go back to the VHS versus beta thing. You can have the best technology in the world, but if it doesn't get adopted and used, then it might as well just die in a box, die in a drawer somewhere. So I guess you're expecting there to be a critical mass of adoption at some point that would need to happen for this to become a global standard.
Oh, absolutely, of course. So any tech startup has the network effect problem to get their head around. So one thing to note, which is that these are surveillance devices, essentially. There's one part of them that isn't, which is the trusted execution environment. If it's a discrete chip in a PC or something, it might be called a trusted platform module, but it's essentially the place where you can stash a bit of data that's not being surveilled, that is actually secure and private to your device. And so that provides the placing your hardware where we can set up a binding between the device and the infrastructure. And that's why you don't have to manage your keys. The keys are over here, but we set up a secure remote control essentially to that. And that's an important part of the architecture of this system. What's interesting is on this side of it, on the user side of it, the protocol is built in a mechanism by which you can recreate that little secret by going out to the people in your life that you know and trust, and you say to them, hey, look, I need a favor. I need you to store this little bit of cryptographic stuff for me. And if I ever lose my phone, I get a new phone, then I need you to press the button and help me to rebind to this phone. Now, you're going to need more than one. You're going to need a bunch of those. And but not all of the people, because people go on holidays, but some, probably most of them. And so your community of friends, families, and associates can help you get back into your identity in an emergency. And that fact that they have to go out to then their close and trusted network provides then the ability for them to go, hang on a minute, what's this could be useful to me? And so we can potentially build network effect that way through the security protocol itself.
Wow. Absolutely
So
fascinating.
the partnering model, which we think is going to get us into scale mass deployments anyway, there's actually a viral mechanism in the back of this to create that further networking, what we call the mycelium strategy.
We're not going to be using 1Password for this, obviously.
Yeah, correct.
Okay.
This deprecates username and passwords, but it also deprecates pass keys, which are a slightly more complex version of the same thing.
And does this incorporate biometrics in any way?
Your device does. So the biometrics, whatever security you've got on your device, is your kind of local security, if you like. That's the thing that you need to pass to be able to have that remote control through your device. So if you've got really a lot of assets on there, some important stuff, then you're going to want to increase the strength of your device security. You might want to FIDO key or HSM or whatever. You can just scale up.
So in this environment, boot access is still root access for all intents and purposes. If I can get into the system, then I've got access to the system and I've got access to the data, really. So
if you're your device, then you can control your assets, make payments, sign things.
Okay, cool. So there's going to be a human element of this that is still vulnerable. Is what I'm saying. It doesn't solve a guy with a gun breaking into my house and saying, put your thumb on this thing to decrypt your iPhone because otherwise I'm going to blow your head off. It doesn't prevent that.
That's right. Yeah. But that's them taking a risk too, right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, for sure. Totally. No, it makes sense. There's a risk reward.
Robots turn up in our homes as our own personal security detail.
Yeah, yes. Although the robots might be the bad robots might also be turning up at our door.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Then we got Skynet. Yeah. Super interesting space, something that I'm, again, not an expert in, something that I don't know much about, and absolutely fascinating discussion. Who would typically be the ones that you would want to reach out to you to learn more about this technology? Is it the banks? Is it the fintech companies? Is it platform vendors? Who is it that would make the ideal? What is your ICP, like your foundational ICP? You've mentioned insurance companies, but if we cast our net just slightly wider than that, who would you like to reach out to you to learn more about this technology? Because I'm sure that most of it goes right over and I consider myself a pretty damn technical person. A significant portion of this would go right over my head when we get into the nitty-gritty of it. So who makes the ideal customer to reach out to you, or potential customer to reach out to you and learn more?
Really, it's groups that are serious about the future of e-commerce and AI. We have an associate who is deeply into the idea of dynamic ontologies, such that systems that think strategically, essentially, and move towards where the ball is going to land. And anyone with that level of strategic thinking is right in our sweet spot. The answer is, again, D, all of the above, because it's going to become part of the internet protocol, essentially. So we anticipate pretty much everybody using it and probably needing to use it, which is, again, completely wild. That's a fact. So one of the things that I'm really deeply interested in from an e-commerce point of view, let's just stick to the topic here, is the opportunities around digital content marketing. Because a vaulted object is designed for digital content. And part of it is that with the legal attestation things, the seals and signatures and deeds and contracts, we can then do legal rights management around intellectual property in those for that encrypted content. So what that means is that then you can build a content marketing framework that enables people to come in and license the fractional copyrights, say a derivative right. Oh, I want to make a remix. Oh, a use right. Yeah, I just want to listen to it. But now I want to take a derivative right, buy a derivative right, and then I can make a remix and create my own thing. But all the rights attributions are sorted out in the background as well. So the original artist gets paid when I get paid for my derived content.
So we're talking next generation smart contract, effectively.
Yeah, that's right. We don't use the term smart contract. We prefer to call them procedures, right? Because it's real about, but they're financialized procedures.
Gotcha.
And it's we have a really interesting model for that, for the sharing economy. And essentially what we intend to do is to enable purchasers of licenses to then be able to sub-license to people that they share to. So in other words, if I buy an album off some website and it's a vaulted object, then I can share that out to Bandcamp and get all my homies on Bandcamp to license it from me. The majority of the revenues will go to the artist, but I get to take a clip and I actually get paid for hitting the share button. And I benefit from the long tail that then creates. So it's essentially referral marketing.
Yeah.
But it's a modern version of referral marketing.
Yeah, and DRM all rolled into one. Listen, fascinating discussion. I think I understood about 85% of all that we discussed, which is great. Fantastic. Now, I will drop a link to your LinkedIn profile and to your website in the show notes. But other than that, if anybody wants to reach out and have a conversation with you about this new cryptographic effectively technology, what is the best way to get a hold of you?
Scott@vaulted.ventures. DM me through LinkedIn.
Absolutely love it. Now, as we do come down to the end of our time together, this is where I get to flip the script. I get to hand the microphone over to you and let you ask me one question, any question you like. It can be personal or professional. Mr. Scott Phillips from Vaulted Ventures, what is your question for me today?
Jason, where do you think the AI industry is going from a legal rights perspective?
Yeah, that's a super good and super interesting question. The latest, I think it was Anthropic, or it was one of the majors recently, I just saw in the last week, there was a ruling by the courts in the US that they could train their LLMs on copyrighted material. And effectively, so long as that copyrighted material, it effectively started to create a clearer definition around fair use, is effectively what the courts did in the US. Whether that becomes the norm, I'm not sure, but I know that, for example, if I read a book or if I read a document or a PDF or something like that, or listen to a piece of music, and then I create my own book report, for lack of a better term, around that I'm not infringing copyright. But if I quote, and even taking selected small quotes from that copyrighted work is also legally protected. But where that line is, where it goes from protected to unprotected, meaning if I take 3 pages and I quote 3 pages, now in most instances, I'm now infringing on copyright. And I think where the courts are going to really struggle is what constitutes a derivative work that should be compensated for, and what is effectively a book report type of response from an LLM or a ChatGPT or someone else. I think that is the area that is going to be really difficult to define and even more difficult to enforce. I think that is the thing that, for me, I think it all sounds good that, okay, cool, creators. I'm a creator. So the reality is I got almost 550 podcasts out there. I've got several thousand posts to LinkedIn. I've got several thousand posts on Reddit and X and everywhere else. I put my thoughts out into the world every single day. I spend 8 hours a week on content alone, and I have done for years, since 2016. So the reality is that kind of my thoughts and my learnings over the last 25 years of this industry, I'm slowly getting out into the world. And I think it's got a value, but it's interesting that you asked that question in exactly that way, because I had a thought earlier today. IP, but I'm trying to think of the exact saying I came up with earlier today, but it was around this idea that when I work with clients, oftentimes I'm sharing proprietary collateral that has taken me years to create, like a discovery questionnaire or something like that. So I'm sharing IP, but it requires me. And what I mean by that is it's all fine and good to have my collateral and my documentation and my questions and my process. That's all fine and good. But without me delivering that process, it doesn't have much value. It's all fine and good, and they can try to recreate my process with one of their internal team members or something like that. But it is the 25 years of experience I have doing what I do that actually breathes life into that IP and gives it a value when I run the process. Someone else running the process without the same experience as me won't get the same amount of value out of that. And so I still have this conflict or this tension in my mind and in my heart around how we agree on a set of AI ethics that's even reasonable, enforceable, and everything else. And the thing I come back to, and I've talked about this on my podcast multiple times before, there's two things about AI ethics that I have questions about. One is the famous ant conundrum that Elon Musk has talked about on numerous occasions, which is this. When we as human beings go to build a road, we kill 1 trillion ants. It's not because we hate ants. It's because we want to build a road, okay? AI at some point is potentially going to get to the same place where it's got its own agendas, it's trying to achieve something, and in the process it wipes out human beings because we're more fragile than bits and bobs that can live in multiple places at one time and aren't susceptible to heat and cold like we are. And therefore, AI might wipe us out, not because it hates us and wants us to die, but because it has an agenda that is incompatible with us living. That's the first thing. And I still struggle to wrap my head around what that looks like. Two, we can't even, as global humanity, define globally what constitutes statutory rape. And what I mean by that is age of consent. We've got different countries around the world have different ages of consent, all the way from 12 years old to 22, right? Some Middle Eastern countries, the age of consent is 12, and then we got other countries. Like when I moved from America, 18 age of consent is the average in all the states. And then I moved to New Zealand where the age of consent is 16. I was like, this feels insane to me. It feels wild to me that some young person in high school can sleep with somebody that's 50 years old and it's not statutory rape because they're 16. It's just wild to me. But that gets to the heart of the matter, which is we can't agree on global ethics on the most fundamental aspects of law and life. How do we ever think we can agree on global AI ethics? I think it's an impossible task. And I think that's the thing that scares me the most and gives me the most pause.
Oh, that's interesting. I actually don't have quite the same level of concern around that because the internet and the degree to which we are able to communicate globally, like we're doing now, is taking us into a new world. And so the regulation of AI, people talk about AI governance. I actually don't use that term. I talk about governed AI. And I think this is an important distinction, which is that if you can put the cryptographic foundations underneath it, then, and that support common law principles, common law rights and duties, then you can have a system of governed AI. It's governed by its nature so that a person has responsibility for every AI. And if there are AIs that are existing that aren't under the dominion of a human person that is taking responsibility for them and can, then it's the Descartes protocol. If you take my meaning, that thing should be turned off because that's Skynet, where that's going rogue. Really what we need is governed AI. So it's governed by people. This infrastructure that we're talking about, it has another name. It's not very publicly used at the moment. It's the Internet of People.
Not the internet, not the IoT, Internet of Things.
We're in the era of the Internet of Things at the moment because everything that we do, all the identities on the internet, are IP address.
Yeah.
So they need to be human identities, digital identities. But that needs to be done correctly. And we don't want to go goose stepping into a totalitarian dictatorship. So it's a fine line.
It is. It's a fascinating discussion. And I agree with you. Despite my concerns and misgivings about AI, I would rather be part, hopefully, of a global solution around this. And I would rather be contributing to a stimulating discussion around it and the risks of it. I've been in this industry for 25 years. I've seen things go horribly wrong at different times. And I would like to be able to contribute to that ongoing global discussion about digital rights and responsibilities, ultimately, is what it boils down to. And that's, I think it's a really important part of modern culture that we have to bring into mainstream discussion, and it cannot just be technologists that are leading this discussion. And that's the thing. I think we need artists, we need people of all walks of life, we need as much diversity in this discussion as we can possibly get, because there are angles of this that pure technologists will never see coming. And they just can't, because their brain doesn't work that way. My wife is a creative, for example, and I don't consider myself a creative, or at least not a traditional creative. Writing and speaking are my creative endeavors, but she's a more traditional creative in that she can draw, and she's much more artistic in nature by default. Her default setting is to be more artistic in nature. And so there are certain things she thinks of and sees in the world that it would never even cross my mind to think about. And so I think that's why we need this discussion to be a very broad discussion.
Yes, as we thread the needle between all these tricky issues around technology and security and rights management and all that sort of stuff, what we actually need to do, in addition, is make sure that everyone has a way to earn a living out of
Yeah.
the digital economy.
Totally.
And the broader economy. But as everything digitizes, we have to make sure that people have a way to make a living and to thrive in on the other side of whatever this is, that we're clearly going through something major at the moment.
Yes.
And it has wild implications for governments, for this whole jurisdictional issue that we were touching on, and pretty much every other thing. So I really think we're going through a type of technological revolution at the moment. Like, we might be into a phase where that level of change just keeps on happening. This is predicted in the science fiction, right?
Yeah.
But whatever that looks like on the other side, we have to ensure that people have a way to survive and to thrive.
I could not agree more. Very well said. And I think that is the perfect way to finish off this very deep, very interesting discussion. I super appreciate your time, and I can't wait to speak to you again soon. Are you a B2B or D2C e-commerce merchant? Then head over to greenwoodconsulting.net to learn how we can help you scale your business.